So I guess that everybody knows Microsoft. That's clear. Most of you probably know Roche, but who of you knows us? Yes, but you work for the same company. The only one? Well, that's a pity because I guess most of you are actually getting in contact with our softwares. Whoever of you ever shops for groceries at the Lidl supermarket? Then you're familiar with us, even though you don't realize it. If you ever fly a plane with KLM and you get food in your plane, then you encounter our solutions. If you ever have something transported over our European railways, cargo transported, then it's probably planned with our software. So even though we're not as well known and as familiar as some of our fellow speakers today, many of you have actually benefited, hopefully, from the services that we provide. We are hopefully one of those Sherpas in the field. And in the next 15 minutes, I think my talk is going to be a little bit shorter than the rest. I want to give a couple of ideas into your direction. So I want to tell very briefly what we do at UpOVO, not so much, give a few examples, but then mostly talk about how we, from our perspective as software developers, software implementers, and maintainers of mostly planning software in supply chain processes, try to help our customers in tackling this supply chain risk angle. And I bet you that you will hear a couple of things that you've probably not heard before. So I hope that's interesting. So, we solve complex planning puzzles. That's basically what we try to do. And with complexity, we try to collect as many R's as possible. Maybe that's because my first name is Rodolfo, so I like the letter R. But the more resources that are associated with a planning puzzle, from people to materials to types of goods with all their shapes and the characteristics you have it, the more that is included into the puzzle, the more interesting it becomes. Then there's, of course, regulations, especially on the European railroads. You have to comply with many different national regulations, and they're different everywhere. Just to give you a very short insight, in one country you have to have 2 or 3 containers in between containers with dangerous goods, and another one we don't care. So how do you plan for things like that? And of course, there are business rules. We heard quite a lot from other speakers. I'm sure we'll hear much more in these 2 days, that every single business also, of course, is trying to figure out how to do it yourselves and what is important in your own complexity. But then in addition to that, there are of course more R's that we can think of. The R, for instance, of readiness, right? What happens when the system is down? And when you're supplying software that plans the trucks that go out to all of our little supermarkets on a daily basis, I believe that is mission critical. When that goes down, then they are in trouble within 24 hours, 48 hours. A lot of people are in trouble, and so we are in trouble as well. And the last one is responsiveness, of course. If anything should happen, and it is happening on a more continuous basis, and the impacts are increasing because of climate change and other disruptions, with or without humans involved at the other side of the big lake and the pond, then how do we deal in the right way and as fast as we can? So a bit more about that in a moment, but that's what we call complexity. Then we try to design and develop and implement reliable and sustainable software to do so. And reliability in our case means building upon enterprise-proven stacks. So we don't just come up with a new thing every time, fortunately not. We work with a couple of very well-respected partners. When it comes to logistics planning and resource planning, that's Delmia Quintic. Maybe some of you have heard of that. And otherwise, that could be an interesting name to look up. But we also have our own solutions that we've been developing and innovating on for 30 years. EcoLogic, that's called, from the name in the beginning. And when we talk about sustainability, that journey started a couple of years ago, very simple, very linear, with the idea like, how much energy does your code cost? Does your computing effort cost? But we've gone way beyond that. And sustainability is actually an exercise of thinking about digital sufficiency. In some cases, more code, more applications are not the way forward. We can actually make things a lot simpler, and with that, not just more sustainable, but often also safer. So we've turned around this idea of trying to sell more software into trying to sell as little software as possible. I know this is a message that was a bit strange to our sales departments, but I really believe in that direction. And there are a couple of other points I want to highlight in a second. So we try to do this for end-to-end supply chains in many different worlds and fields. I just highlighted a few a moment ago, and these are some of the names of the companies that we are proud to be able to do that for. And hopefully you do recognize a few of these logos and know now that we are behind them, at least when it comes to part of their supply chain software. Then one step deeper a little bit, I just want to highlight two different cases, pretty random, to give you a bit of a sense on how this works. Lufthansa Cargo, of course, close by here, enormous player in the European air freight market, enormous complexity in their planning. Their whole handling process involves zillion amounts of different products that need to go from A to B into these planes. They all have to be packed. You see that here. That's sort of a Tetris-like assignment. Like, how do you pack them in the most efficient way? They have to be at the right place, at the airport, at the right time to be loaded in the right aircraft. All of these things are planned, but many things change over time. Airplanes do not arrive on time, do not leave on time, do not taxi to the place that they were hoped to be taxiing to. That has all kinds of consequences in real time for planning to make sure this goes smoothly. And the whole handling process is coordinated with help of our software. But also, when it comes to older systems, legacy systems, it can be very interesting to look at how we do that anew. A good example is DB Cargo Netherlands, right? The DB Cargo group, we all know them. They're very big, but they're also organized quite nationally. So specifically in the Netherlands, we've been working for 2 years already analyzing what kind of applications they have been building themselves or adapting themselves over time, just because people working there have a good idea, know about their own business, and start adapting things themselves. It works until they go with pension or fall ill or whatever, and then nobody knows what was done, how it works, and what to do with it. And one good example is called vakdossier. I have no idea how to translate that into English, but I'll explain what it means. It's basically an application that allows DB Cargo Netherlands to automatically check and prepare the certificates required for every transport over the railways. This is an application that they just built themselves because two guys were sitting in a room, maybe in 1994, I don't know what it was, thinking we want to do this differently, and they built their own systems around it. Through thinking about software more holistically than just pushing your standardized solutions, which we don't do, it allows also the flexibility to map whatever is done and try to translate it or regenerate it, how we call it, into new code, into new functionalities. And that's one of the things we can do with EcoLogic, which also contributes to lowering risk and vulnerability. Now, one step further. I hope you're still with me, because I'm gonna go on shallow ice. So when we try to think about the role of software in things like risk management and in helping companies, we try to be a bit ahead compared to many others. And that means we try to imply 6 different principles, 6 different lines of thinking, theoretical lines of thinking, into every process that we're designing, that we're building, that we're architecturing. And you see them here. And I'll briefly go through them one by one. And if you want to know more, we can talk about it at the round table or outside. We'll be here for 2 days, and I will be very happy to speak about these things. First is digital sufficiency, which I already explained in the beginning a bit, right? More digital tools, more software is not always the solution. Sometimes less is actually better for many reasons. But there are others. So you have the principle of frugal computing, right? Has anybody ever heard of frugal computing? Oh, you have, Susan? Maybe some others have as well. And that's the idea that by design you try to implement into your software the flexibility to adapt, to be able to use as little resources as possible on a continuous basis, right? And there are many, many opportunities to go in that direction. And to give you just one example, for many of our clients, those applications that we have running with them, they run on servers. and we maintain those servers, and sometimes we even host those servers. So we have created our own layer in saying that a server only starts up when somebody at the company, at the client, actually requests to use the application on that server, and not by default. And after we changed that, we saw that from the, let's say, 100 servers that we have on a daily basis, actually 80% are not called upon, not even daily, or definitely not at night, and sometimes not for prolonged periods of the day. And a simple feature like this, if you design it in well, can save a lot of computing cost and energy savings as well by doing that. Well, that's just the beginning, but there are many other ideas you can think behind frugal computing. Then you have the idea of intermittent computing. And that's the idea of that it has to be very reliable, what the kind of computing that you offer, right? So there should be no instances where it doesn't work anymore. And one of the things we're doing in that direction is that it's also possible now, and we only use it in some cases, to choose the location, the data center, where your server is running on a continuous basis. So we have a beautiful tool, and I can show it outside if you want. I really like it, where you can basically say, okay, I want to run these applications. What options do I have of servers in Europe or in the US, but I think now in the future it's going to be more Europe for us. What options I have in terms of servers? What kind of energy usage are they having on a daily basis? So basically, the colder it is here in Germany, the more interesting German data centers become, because they need less energy to cool their servers now than they would in July. But in July, the servers in Norway or Sweden would become more interesting. You can actually build into your tools that you are flexible in selecting and changing between them. Then you have the idea of collapse informatics, right? And that's the idea that is related to the idea of risk management and responsiveness in case of disaster. What happens when the amount of computing power, access to energy, or availability of high-end resources is limited? What happens when we run into the situation of scarcity? So can we design applications, can we build applications that are also possible to run on older instances, on older versions of software that don't necessarily need to use the latest technology and the latest equipment? You'll find that in many cases, once you start asking those questions, that's actually possible. We don't always need the latest of the latest. And the last two are actually more into the physical domain as well. So when you talk about salvage computing, it's about designing software that allows hardware to run more prolonged. Right? So basically mimicking or aligning the lifespan of your software to the lifespan of your hardware. And not needing to replace hardware every 1 or 2 or 3 years because you have a cool new feature or a new update that doesn't run on the old hardware principle anymore. And the final one, perma-computing, that's the idea of regeneration in computing. So, and that's a very interesting thinking exercise and also gamification exercise. So depending on the value you want to create with your software in terms of, for instance, ecological value, right? We run less trains, or the trains are fuller when we do this, or we save more of the non-eaten meals from the KLM airplanes, things like that. That gives us an allowance to invest in the software we're creating to achieve that goal. And these thinking exercises, these starting points to think about software, I believe are very, very interesting in terms of making them ecologically more sustainable, more reliable, but also more risk-prone, and also sit in this direction of becoming less dependent upon our non-European neighbors, let's say. So that's what we are doing, and that's how we are trying to approach this topic and help our customers as Sherpas from a software perspective. And apart from that, we're also, of course, looking very closely at what AI has to offer and the developments in that. And the last thing I want to do is introduce you to Pano. That's also new for you, but we have a name for our wizard since this morning. It's derived from panoramics. If any of you loves Asterix and Obelix, you'll know about panoramics. This is Pano, and Pano is our wizard when it comes to figuring out how to deal with the 6 principles that I showed in the last slide when it comes to judging whether AI can bring us forward in our solutions. And in the little booth that we have in the coffee corner, I'll be happy to show what Pano is capable of doing already today. Thank you very much. And,
Good.